For hundreds of years, the Ashanti people of the Ghana and other cultures of Western Africa have orally shared hundreds if not thousands of stories, explaining the origins of their world and the workings of it. These myths and legends spread from Africa during the slave trade and made their way throughout the Caribbean and the southern region of what is now the United States. Of these stories, one in particular, a cultural hero, a trickster, has spread his web farther than any other deity of the old world. His stories were of laughter, of wit and lessons passed down through generations and changing, shifting, and spreading. This being crawled into houses and minds of believers and inspired them, as well as uniting these people together as a cultural hero. Kwaku Anansi is regarded as a deity of man, a spirit, a god, an intermediary between humans of the earth and the god of the sky. But above all, he is the trickster of African lore. Though there are many tricksters in world mythology, such as Brer Rabbit, Loki, Hanuman, Coyote and the Fox, Anansi stands out as the spider of Africa. He is the son of the sky god Niame and the earth goddess Asasi-Ya. In this sense, he is between heaven and earth. Anansi would use his web to travel to and fro from this world and the other, and he would use his wit to communicate with the gods above and help humanity below. He was a trickster, after all. His stories are stories of the mind overcoming the brute strength of other animals such as elephants and leopards. This is how the lonely spider became an inspiration for people to use their mind, their wit, cunning, and the lessons learned to overcome seemingly unbearable obstacles. In one of his stories, Anansi was the only one who dared to play a game with the elephant. This massive creature wanted to play a physical game, where, if the spider would have tried it head-on, he would have been crushed by the elephant. As elephants usually play physically with one another, like headbutting, the spider knew he did not stand a chance. So what did he do? He tricked the antelope, the lion, and a whole array of creatures one after the other, inviting each one to his house to have dinner during the famine. Of course, each one trusting and in need of food said yes. In the end, the elephant would come in and butt him with the strength of the beast. The spider survived, but the guest was crushed by the unknowing elephant. Thinking he had won, the elephant would laugh, only to see the spider still alive the next day. This happened time and time again, until finally, it was Anansi's turn. With a hammer and wedge, he made quick work of the elephant, who would have thought that a simple game would leave to so many dead bodies behind. No matter how small he was, no matter how large his opponent was, the spider crawled safely away. His tales and legends were brought to the New World and spread through the Caribbean as the spider weaving its web to different islands and taking new forms, new colors, and manifestations. His transformation still falls under what this god could do. After all, as many tricksters are, he was a shapeshifter. He has many names. Anansi could be called Ant Nansi, Kwaku Nansi, or simply Kwaku, Nance, the spider, Kompananzi, Yanze. He is the first man of spider and the spider of men. This creature and his shape-shifting abilities do not go ignored in his stories. He could appear to you as a man with spider-like qualities such as having 4 arms or 4 legs. He could oftentimes appear to you as a giant spider who could speak and understand human custom and language. He could also appear as a seemingly normal spider of varying colors and sizes. He would knowingly change from species to species of spider. He has even been shown to be a spider with human head, or a human with a spider's face. This trickster taught humans many skills, such as loving stories and sharing with stories with others so that they would learn of the spider's wisdom. He also taught humans how to pick beans and trick others to do his work. He is even responsible for showing humans how to create fire by stealing it from the gods themselves. Anansi's father was called Niame, the king of the gods, and his mother was Asaseya, the earth goddess. Anansi was a god of humans and humanity, giving gifts to men and women and usually intermingling with them in his stories. He would often change the world, and he is responsible for having shaped the world as it is today. One time, Niame, who was not only the god of the sky but also the keeper of stories, decided to keep these tales and legends for himself. Anansi wanted the stories for himself, to tell around the campfire, to share with humanity, or, who knows, maybe he had some darker motive with owning the stories. After all, owning the stories of humanity is almost the same as owning humanity itself. Niame gave him a task, a challenge, and asked for 3 things in exchange of the stories: a hive of hornets, a snake, and a leopard. Using his wits once more, Anansi set out on his adventure, knowing that it would not be easy. After all, these creatures are either large or come in a great number, and each one is very dangerous. He used his lucky gourd or calabash to store the hornets inside after convincing them that it was raining and hiding in the gourd was their only option. He got them, closed the gourd, and he relished having acquired the first of 3. He then set out to seek a serpent. He saw one and held out a stick. He told the serpent that the stick was much longer than he was. The serpent laughed and told him no, it was not. Anansi laid down the stick, and the serpent slithered next to it, so that he may compare lengths. When the serpent did this, Anansi acted quickly and weaved his web and tied the snake to the stick, trapping him. He collected the second one. The leopard was much larger and fiercer. Anansi knew what he had to do. The feline looked at the ridiculously small spider, laughing and dancing and daring him to catch him. The leopard was amused and decided to do as the spider said. After all, it is a small spider, and he was a large cat. He ran towards Anansi, and as he did so, the ground underneath him broke, and he fell into a pit dug by the spider. It had been covered by leaves, and the leopard never saw it. Impressed by his son's ability to catch these 3 dangerous creatures, Niame gave him the stories of the world. In one of his first adventures and tasks, every time he made a move, the world seemed to suffer for it, thrown off balance because of what he did. One day, Anansi noticed that humans were working the fields, and they did this often, never taking a break. These were the creatures of Earth, humans were, and Anansi seemed to like them, or at least have some compassion towards them, or some interest towards them. So, Anansi wove a web and went to the heavens. He asked his father, Niame, who was often distracted, not really paying attention to his creatures, to look at humanity and humbly ask to give them rest. Anansi defended these men and women who were hard workers and convinced his father, the sky god, to bring about the night. This way, humanity could rest and sleep, and they did. Humanity slept and rested. Then Anansi noticed that people were often afraid of the dark. And so Anansi had a special mask made. Masks are often personifications of what they represent. One wears a mask and changes, transforms, and in African lore, masks have even more powers, allowing humans to become gods, allowing humans to become spirits. In fact, part of the history of Halloween was to wear masks and transform for a night, tricking spirits. The Mask of the Moon was created so that they may have light during the night. However, the light of the moon was not a warm light. It did not do what the sun could do. Sadly also, the nights brought with them the cold. And in this cold, suffering came. So, Anansi spun his web once again and brought the mask of the day, the sun that shined bright upon the earth. The consequence of this is that the sun, if it was out for too long, the heat would become unbearable and it would burn away the food. It would burn away the earth. In this scorching day, people began to die, and plants as well. Anansi was left no choice but to spin another web and reach up to the clouds of the heaven and let loose the waters of the sky. These waters were refreshing at first. They brought life to the plants and to humanity as well. But too much was falling. Too much water fell from the sky, and the floods came. It was then that Nyame took notice of all these changes Anansi had brought to the world. Nyame settled the floods. He brought balance to the world. This is how, though his intentions were good, Anansi's interactions brought about much death. But in a way, it also brought a new balance to the world we live in now. His actions made Anansi not only give us night, day, the flood season, and the sun and moon, but all the things included with this, the calendar, the tides, the solar and lunar cycles that men could construct their lives around. This deity has spread his web throughout the entire creation of the world we know today. One element of Anansi is his gourd, which has appeared several times in his stories. It was here where he stored water to make it rain and catch the hornets. It was also there where he stored the hornets before delivering it to his father. In another story, Anansi used the water of his gourd to clean a sickly woman. This sick woman, after being cleaned, became a beautiful maiden. Anansi took away her curse and stored it in the gourd. But Anansi had a fight with his wife. The gourd fell and it broke. Disease spread through the world. Everything he had collected from the sickly woman broke apart and fell into the waters and rivers of earth. That is why we have disease right now. Anansi has also stored his stories inside. Was he trying to keep the stories for himself, or was he going to intentionally spread the stories and give them to humanity? Anansi has become a cultural hero, but a complicated one. A hero of a past that should never be forgotten. In our culture today, Anansi has made an appearance in the recent series based on Neil Gaiman's novel, American Gods. Anansi's first appearance is in a slave ship heading for the New World. One man prayed to the god, and the god appeared. Anansi gave them a truly inspiring and, in a sense, terrifying speech. It was a scene where, with his stories, Anansi inspired them to create a large sacrifice in his name. The boat was destroyed, and Anansi arrived in the New World as a brightly colored spider. In the myths and stories of Anansi, he became a symbol of resistance against the owners or oppressors. He was a symbol of heritage and culture, and he inspired humanity to continue fighting for their survival, to go against all the odds. Neil Gaiman had another story called Anansi Boys, following the children of the gods such as Fat Charlie on a path to self-discovery and a cultural discovery. Anansi has been compared to Renard the fox of southern France, the Native Americans' coyote of the Hopi culture, and Anansi even had a close encounter with another trickster, Brer Rabbit. Another famous spider in mythology comes from the Greeks, Arachne, who was a woman who challenged the goddess Athena in a weaving contest. Offended that this mortal would dare to challenge a god, Athena transformed Arachne into a spider who was cursed to weave webs forever. This is how the Greeks explained how spiders who are descendants of Arachne are doomed to weave webs. That is all for now. Thank you for listening, and peace out.